there can be some confusion around, well, what do people mean by the word accountant, right? Some people may think, oh, they just do taxes. Oh, they're bean counters. Oh, they help create the budgets. Well, like the answer is yes, in a lot of variety of ways. But what exactly are those roles for a small business owner? And is there a potential that you might be asking someone to operate outside their lane?
Hey there, and welcome to Money and You. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. My search for more fulfilling work led me to career and business coaching, where I stumbled upon a game-changing discovery. Money issues often start with our mindset and habits. You see, our relationship with money is the key to overcoming those frustrating financial obstacles. As an entrepreneur, coach, and problem solver, I'm passionate about helping you create a great relationship with money. Because, turns out, that's the foundation for a limit-free life. Each week on Money and You, I speak with amazing guests about all things money, mindset, practical tips, and everything in between. We're here to give you new insights, education, and empowerment so money can be one of your favorite relationships. So join us for some lively conversations and let's transform your financial life together. Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Money and You podcast. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host, and very excited about today's guest. Today's guest is going to cover a lot of money topics, some we've never covered, and just to give a great overview in many areas. If you're a business owner or if you're just a person handling your finances, this is going to be a great show for you. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to Jayson Mamaclay. I need my glasses for this. Let's see. Jayson Mamaclay, him, is a vice president at Norman Professional Services, which provides fractional CFO and outsourced accounting services that elevate the financial literacy and strengthen the financial backbone of small businesses across the United States. For lots of entrepreneurs, business success and growth comes from doing good work and loving what you do. But chances are, numbers aren't likely your strong suit. Eventually, a company needs more intentional attention to financials in order to sustainably grow. And there may be some fear, guilt, or shame held by some business leaders for being, quote, found out that they don't really understand their numbers like they feel like they should. For those entrepreneurs, the team at NPS prides itself in being trusted advisors that can gently provide the financial literacy an entrepreneur needs to truly manage and grow their business. Jayson, thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate your time.
Michelle, it's an absolute pleasure being here, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So I know when we talked, you had so many great ideas for topics, and we talked about a variety of things, but I want to start because I love what your bio says about entrepreneurs, sort of trying to almost pretend that they know their numbers better than they do, or that they understand, they understand, we know that they understand their business. They understand their purpose. They understand their products and services. They understand their clients. But they need to understand their numbers. And so what have you seen out there about how they interact with because so much of the show is about your relationship with money. How are entrepreneurs interacting with their money and having that relationship?
Yeah, well, if you think about it, if you find yourself in this particular position, as I talk about it inside my bio, you're definitely not alone. Like, first, there are going to be lots of people who, just as you mentioned, Michelle, like really try to put up a puffed chest or a lot of confidence about how it is that their business is doing. I mean, who here has gone to a networking event and ultimately all the conversations are like, oh, how's business? Oh, yeah, business is great. And behind that visage, we might be trembling in our boots to be like, well, I don't know about this, or I'm worried about that. And that's just a very real and relatable experience as an entrepreneur. And what's important to be able to do is to have a trusted circle that you can speak with, whether it be advisors that you have, coaches that you may be able to see, people that you can trust either inside or outside your organization to really dive into what's actually going on within the business. And part of that formula is really taking an important and hard look at the financials so that you not only know what's been going on, but what also could be going on in the future and how to be able to plan for it. Like most money situations, a lot of people may feel like, well, if I don't pay attention to it, everything's going to turn out okay. When in fact, that's probably one of the few dimensions where if you actually don't pay attention to it, things actually could end up for the worse. And it'll be really important for you to be sharing conversations about it, to be exploring it, and to be getting a support team behind you to help explain what's going on and figure out the right path forward.
Yeah, thank you. That avoidance, whether you're an entrepreneur or, you're just dealing with your own personal finance, that is one of the red flags, in my opinion, sort of signaling that your relationship with money needs some improvement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as with any relationship, we can't avoid getting to understand it and deal with the realities of it. So, yeah, that's great. And, you talk about having this support team, and I think a lot of times they're uncomfortable with that too. They don't want, people, even their financial people who are there to help them. They kind of want to get things in order before they get that person involved, I guess, because it's, either they feel some shame around it or whatever. And I'd love to hear your take on when is the right time to get people on board.
Yeah, that's absolutely for sure. I could understand how there can be some of that fear, some of that shame, some of that being afraid of judgment from a professional whose job it is to help get things in order and help improve situations.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just be clear. People in these types of roles see everything and they've seen everything too. And their job and their opportunity is to help and to help in a non-judgmental way. So I do just want to address that it's definitely a very natural and vulnerable feeling to say, I don't know if I'm ready to have somebody come in and take a look at things when those might be the very times when you need and can best benefit from some potential outside expert help. So I'd love to kind of tee up the conversation. Michelle, just given that kind of the background that we both had, there can be some confusion around, well, what do people mean by the word accountant, right? Some people may think, oh, they just do taxes. Oh, they're bean counters. Oh, they help create the budgets. Well, the answer is yes, in a lot of variety of ways. But what exactly are those roles for a small business owner? And is there a potential that you might be asking someone to operate outside their lane? So I actually have a perspective that there are 4 different definitions of accountant that may pop in people's minds when they say the word accountant. So first, there's the CPA. They're the people who you likely go to take care of your taxes, whether it's for the business or for yourself personally. Their job is to go in and help make sure that they stay up to date with all the different tax regulations, both federally and locally within your states, so that you could mitigate your tax exposure. And a lot of their attention and strategies will center around that. And that is a very common consideration of who is an accountant. But then somebody else might say, oh, my accountant does my QuickBooks, does my collections. My accountant does some of the back office transactional level data. And I assert that that role is more formally known as the bookkeeper role within an organization. Their responsibility is data entry. They take all of the different things that are happening with the business, whether it's you spent money on office supplies or collected money from a customer on an overdue invoice, or you paid taxes. They're the ones that are responsible for putting all the different transactions into their appropriate bucket. Now, it is possible that your CPA is doing that too, or maybe a member of your CPA's team is doing that. But realistically, those are two different roles. One's a research focused role, and another is an attention to detail and data entry focused role. And immediately, right away, we go, oh, that might explain why there might be a disconnect where I thought my accountant was doing my books, but I only talk with them once a year instead of getting progress of how things go along the way. Before I hop into the other two roles that I see, Michelle, have you seen that come across in your experience as an accountant or in some of the folks that you've coached?
Yes, and what I feel like has worked best for me and some family business that we have as well has been to have we have a separate bookkeeper. I mean, I have a wonderful tax accountant. He's truly a strategist, but I have a separate person who puts the data together, and like you said, my bookkeeping service. But they work together, which I don't think everybody necessarily has that, but one referred the other. And so it's it's a really good relationship because, but there's that objective data entry. They think a little differently, so I think it's really important that the bookkeeper be the bookkeeper, and he's super smart in that area, but he also keeps things in a way where then the information goes to my tax accountant, and he puts his strategic hat on and starts playing with those numbers. And I feel like there's benefit in having the separation there personally.
Yeah, I completely agree. For some, it works for it all to be in a single house or a single organization. For others, it's perfectly fine to be able to have it separate. I'm actually of the opinion that it actually strengthens your organization to have the power of two independent authorities being able to really chime in on the health of how things are going from a financial perspective, and really pokes a little bit at my history as a CPA who was an auditor in what we call the segregation of duties control, by not having all of your eggs in one singular basket, which could lead you to some potentially risky exposures. It's not that they would happen, but it is a risk exposure that you're able to see. Michelle, that actually leads really, really well into the next role that I was going to explain, if I may go into it.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So another role that often gets overlooked when it comes to the word accountant is the controller. And its specific role is in the name. I know that they say in school, don't define a word based on the word that it is, but really, the controller is responsible for the system of internal controls within an organization. They're responsible for the overarching reporting that happens within the org, and they're responsible also for keeping track for anything unusual that may be popping up, whether they be individual events, maybe some wild transaction that came up, or trends. Hey, we're seeing that expenses in this particular bucket are creeping up and up and up, and we might not have things in place to kind of check those expenses. We might need to look into it. A controller is responsible for keeping track of how this data is being assembled. Is it being assembled correctly? Oftentimes, they're the people that are double checking the work of the bookkeeper, and they present the summary of reports out to the business owner. And they will raise their hand and say, here are a couple of the areas that I think we need to go ahead and peek into a little bit more deeply, or lift the hood and look underneath the cover, or just kind of strategize. What are we going to do if the cost of XYZ things continue to increase? Right. So the controller really kind of provides a level of investigation and clarity on financial data by summarizing the most important things into the reports. Now, again, maybe the bookkeeper can put together the reports, or maybe your CPA is also providing that kind of service. But realistically, if you have somebody who's dedicated for catching things before it gets too late, that could be a really important role within an organization. It's not one that typically gets hired for in the smallest of businesses. Usually the business owner may still be the one wearing that hat to look out for anything that looks unusual. But if you don't already have a keen eye for catching what those kinds of things are, and let's also face it, you're probably busy doing a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Some things can potentially just get missed, and may become a bigger thing when you do need to address them at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because when you and I talked before, I think we both agreed. I don't know that, you know, generally entrepreneurs know the distinctions between these different roles, and I think it is really important to understand them. And then there's the CFO, which is yet another.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I've got a phrase I like thinking: B for bookkeeping and B for backwards facing. A bookkeeper's job is to get history right.
Right.
But if you were to ask a bookkeeper to prepare a forecast for next year, they might be looking like a deer in the headlights or ask, well, what exactly am I supposed to do? Well, if you think about it, you're asking for a history and accuracy focused mindset to try to scope out what if scenarios for the future, which may or may not actually pan out. They're
Right.
based off of assumptions. It's based off of projections. And for a person that their livelihood, their career is around getting information right, that might stress out a bookkeeper quite a bit. So what ends up happening in lots of organizations, all that a budget forecast becomes is last year's actuals plus maybe 5% for inflation. And that's the safest approach that one could take to say, hey, I've got the data that backs us up, and we're just going to go with the most conservative approach. But that might not be what a business owner needs in order to really extrapolate out what's the possibility, what's the opportunity for the business. So I said B for bookkeeping, B for backwards. Well, a CFO stands for Chief Financial Officer, but I also say F for finance, F for future. The CFO's role sits next to the CEO. You wouldn't call it a chief something officer if it wasn't an executive level role. And they're the voice of money for the chief executive officer to think strategically as a leader of the organization, where should the business be going, specifically in terms of where should it invest cash and how are we measuring that return on investment to make sure that it is panning out to be what it is that we wanted it to be.
Yeah, I love that. You know, it's so funny. I have not done like continuing education in accounting for years and years.
Same.
But this past weekend, I went with a friend who's a CFO. He's been a close friend forever to a CFO conference that he was going to. And I didn't go to much of the conference, but I heard a lot and I was mingling with a lot of CFOs. And, you know, their role is super important. And I feel like it's interesting when you look at entrepreneurs and or anybody really who, you know, in a sort of a quest to save money, a lot of times they want maybe their bookkeeper or their controller to do things that are out of, you know, really kind of out of their scope. And a lot of times they'll say yes to it. You know, you were just talking about asking your bookkeeper to do a forecast. Well, chances are, you know, the bookkeeper is going to want to say yes to that and give it a shot. But I think what you're bringing up is so important because these are skill sets that are different, and it's really important to and you know, you and I are in a business group where we're talking about growth and scaling a lot, and it's hard to scale if you're just looking at historical data like you were saying, and just sort of, you know, not thinking bigger with the possibility that maybe a CFO might think about things.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And another thing that I want to highlight is this is the order of the advisors that I would recommend a business owner considering getting that financial support structure. Realistically, it's about when am I taking off all of the different hats that I'm wearing. For
Right.
some businesses that are just starting out, some business owners might be super confident enough to be able to take care of their own taxes. But because of the compliance related components to it and the potential penalties that come without doing it correctly, getting a CPA is one of the very first things that you need to do as a business owner if you don't do it already right away, as a business owner, to make sure that your taxes are represented correctly to the state and to the IRS. Would hate for anyone to undergo unnecessary penalties just because they wanted to save a penny by doing it themselves. There is a lot of really great technology out there that helps empower and enable individuals to take care of stuff on their own. But if you really want to take advantage of what potential opportunities there may be for mitigating taxes, getting expert help through a CPA, I think, is definitely one of the first things that a business owner should contemplate doing.
Yes, and I've said this before on the show, but I love meeting with my accountant because I learn so much. I mean, if I did it myself, which I used to do, but then just like you're saying, keeping up with the changes in the laws, that's just not something I was wanting to do or could do. But it's the conversations we have too. So while, you're after a deliverable like a tax return or whatever, there's so much to be gained from really diving into these conversations. So just because the tax accountant can put together your tax return doesn't mean that you don't want to have conversations about what's going on in that return. Yeah. So, that's where you can really learn a lot, I think.
Yeah, exactly. The rule of thumb that I have for these types of roles is I call it the add a zero rule. So here I've got a version of a presentation where I give where I'm like, if your company is making $2,000 or $3,000, right, go ahead and grab a CPA. When should you grab a bookkeeper? Well, add a zero. If your company is making five figures, it's probably worth your time to finally offload the hours that you'd be spending trying to keep up with your QuickBooks or whatever your accounting system is, to keep up with your invoicing and calling customers to follow up on payments, to keep up with, if you have payroll, like actually entering in the information for your employees or paying off vendors or contractors that are supporting you. From a Dan Martell buyback your time perspective, the opportunity is there to delegate that to somebody to take care of that for you, and for you just simply to oversee the overall process and make sure that that's happening smoothly on an ongoing basis. So at a zero, if your company's making five figures, probably should be considering getting a bookkeeper. The next step, controller. Well, add another zero. If your company is making six figures, say in the $250,000 space or higher, consider getting somebody, maybe not a full-time internal person, but consider getting someone who sits in the controller role. Because let's face it, when you're dealing with $100,000, $200,000, and so on, that's a lot of money. And you kind of really should have a good grasp on making sure that money's not leaking out of the organization, either intentionally or non-intentionally. And it's a good way to get yet another perspective to be monitoring that, so that you're not kind of fussing over all the different ways to keep track of the trends or individual transactions, and somebody's out there looking out for you for it and double checking the work of the ongoing bookkeeper. And then, of course, for the last role with CFO, let's add another zero. When you're in the seven-figure range, making 1 million, 2 million and up, you really want to get that expert level support, because you're at that stage of business growth that you want to make sure that you're making key strategic investments to be able to take yourself to the next step of scaling. And that role needs an executive level voice. It's kind of like, would you ask the receptionist at the front desk of a doctor's office to be the one to pull blood and tell you information about your blood work? Probably not. And so while there's tons of respect for those support team members that are responsible for data entry bookkeeping, they might not be the best role to be able to help you with executive strategy and growth planning. And again, I'm not saying go out and hire a six-figure CFO full-time within your organization. There are fractional opportunities to be able to go and engage with knowledgeable experts to be able to help take things to the next level.
Yeah, and that, I don't know when that started, the fractional, kind of CFO organizations, but it's really a fantastic opportunity for entrepreneurs to get the help they need without hiring, very expensive people to be on their staff. So Yeah, I'd love to, and I just love everything you're saying, but there's this sort of chicken and egg thing
Mm,
where people like to think, well, when I get to this point, when I'm making this much, then I'll hire. And it really, in my opinion, as much as you can, it's a hire forward kind of situation. But
mhm.
what's your take on that?
Yeah, definitely. So you don't want to get ahead of yourself in terms of, well, what is it can you afford? And that's why I kind of use the add a zero rule. Like if you're just starting out and you're making 50, $60,000 in effectively what is a side hustle, right? In terms of top line revenue, it probably isn't the smartest idea to go out and try to find a fractional CFO to go and help you out. The reality of small business is I encourage business owners to build a viable product market fit business that generates cash on its own. And as your business grows and grows in complexity, either because of the number of people that are part of the organization or the number of service offerings that the business offers to its variety of clients or the number of clients that a person needs to cover, which usually dictates the number of people and service offerings that are there. As complexity grows, getting additional support to be able to handle and make sense out of all of that complexity is where things come into play. So for a lot of businesses, they use revenue as a proxy of that. But I would say the most important thing for a business owner when thinking about, hey, when is it right to be able to bring on advisors? I use that add a zero rule for the four different echelons. And if you're below those certain thresholds, really focus in on what is it that I'm selling? How am I capturing the value of what it is that I'm selling? And how am I making sure that it's done in a way that generates me profit, that generates me positive cash flow so that I can continue to be growing and investing in the business. Michelle, something related to that that I think applies not just to businesses, but to individuals as well, is the importance of building up a cash reserve for
Mhm.
key investments that you want to go and make. So maybe it may be, hey, if I'm able to go ahead and like reach however many thousands of dollars inside my hire a CFO fund, right? Then that is a really good thing to go about doing. But you want to also make sure, do I have enough money to be able to support the business if revenue were to shrink or turn to zero for a given period of time. I call that the cash runway. A lot of people call it the rainy day fund, but some way of being able to build up cash reserves that serve towards a specific purpose. On the individual front, it could be, yeah, the rainy day fund to be able to keep the lights on at home and pay for groceries, utilities, and such. A separate fund could be a save for vacation fund, right? So it's like, what's the next step to be able to do something different or separate that elevates or celebrates life in a different way and in a meaningful way? For some, it's let me save up to prepare for buying a home, which whether you are buying your first home or buying your next home and upgrading, it introduces a new complexity in your life. And so as a result, you need to like have a dedicated attention to it as a result.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And all of that is building your relationship with money and when you're paying attention to these things. I love all of that. And I think especially for entrepreneurs, it's challenging to get that reserve. I mean,
Hmm.
that is something that I see as a big goal that people feel very, stuck around because, when you have a business, you can always keep investing in that business,
Yeah.
and you could be in a situation where the revenue fluctuates. I mean, there's a lot of things. So while everybody probably would agree that that's a great idea, the practicalities of making that happen, and that's where I also think bringing in experts like yourself, that's really necessary. I think an objective outside eye on the numbers will help reveal the way to do that. But I think left,
Mm.
in your own way of being and your own habits around your business, it's pretty tough to see the way forward with that. So,
Yeah, it's definitely very natural to kind of like cycle through the same thought pattern, cycle through the same spiral, and find yourself in exactly the same place you were last year because
right.
the only voice to be able to bounce things off of are your own as the leader of the organization. So I absolutely can resonate with that. And in those cases, rather than say bringing on an expert for an extended basis, extended duration, maybe just soliciting the help of an expert, of a CFO, or of a controller for a quick, maybe 1 quarter project to go ahead and really deep dive without the financial like weight of an extended relationship can be a really great way to like great example if you've hit a plateau and you're like I just need to shake things up a little bit and maybe I just need that outside voice. That can be a place where you engage someone for just a short-term project that can have a much lower financial a much lower financial expectation and requirement longer term.
Well, that's really interesting. I actually didn't know that that would be easy to do. So I'm assuming that you guys do that at your firm since you brought it up.
Yeah, definitely. So, a couple of the ways that that a firm like NPS can come into play, we actually have a few signature processes, a few signature programs that center around something like this. One thing could be I just don't know whether or not QuickBooks is working properly. And we have a program called Financial Fitness where, based on our experience in working with small businesses and in servicing them on longer terms, is just understanding, well, what works for small business within QuickBooks? What are best practices that are there? And we do have a relatively short, quick diagnostic to go in and see where are you using QuickBooks in ways that support you, and where are there configurations that maybe might just be as easy as the flick of a button to turn on certain features that could be a world of difference for you in how it is that you are managing and reporting on your financial information. So there's that opportunity, say from that's kind of like a controller, right? They're responsible for the system of internal controls, and that role is also responsible for how reporting is configured. And financial accounting systems like QuickBooks, that's the entire purpose that technology acts as a tool to be able to get you reports of financial information that you need. Another area that we've supported, we have a signature program called the Growth Architect, where we sit with a business owner and say, let's step back and perform a visualization exercise. And Michelle, I feel like you and I have done these visualization exercises both in the group that we're both in and elsewhere as well. But really sitting back and thinking, let's shake free from the ball and shackles that can be experienced in knowing where today's business is. Yeah. And let's envision the business of our dreams in 3 to 5 years. What do we want that vision to be? How much money is it making? How many clients does it serve? What kinds of clients does it serve? What are the projects or service offerings that it's delivering? How much is it charging for that kind of stuff that really embraces its worth? What's the size of the team that's necessary to really have a team managed company that performs all that? Or maybe you are still very much at the helm and the steering wheel, actually like going in and charging into your clients' environments. What does that business look like? What do you want it to look like? And with that vision in the future, we would actually take steps back and say, what are the levers that we need to pull from a financial perspective in order to be able to build up to that business? And we're not looking for figuring out the how right away, but we want to craft, what does this picture look like? And how do we, almost kind of like how a painter like may sketch out what they want the painting to look like, and then we apply the base layer of the background and then work on some of the like foreground elements and then put the shading and highlights afterwards, after that's all said and done. It's a process to be able to build up that. And whether we're looking at how much you're charging, who you're serving, what they're willing to pay, how big of a team that you require and how much you're paying that team, and what else is needed to be able to support the business in order for it to run at those sizes, we would work on creating miniature snapshots along the way to be able to build up to the business of your dreams. Quite literally, a growth architect, where we're building out those blueprints. That's really more like the CFO role, where we sit back and perform that visualization exercise. And then a third that I want to offer up is sometimes people just really need help identifying what's the most profitable component of their business. Because there definitely is a phrase of growing broke, where if you grow a business too fast or in the wrong ways, although your revenue might be ticking up, your profit line may be running flat or potentially decreasing, and you might not know or understand why, because not all growth is good.
Yeah.
Growth needs to be profitable, and you need to do it in a way that is priced appropriately, not just so that the market purchases, but also that you make a profit and invest in the grow of your company, right? And so we, as fractional CFOs, can go in and analyze historical cost and payroll information against the revenues that you make for a particular product or service offering and identify which ones have what's called the gross margin that is the highest. And if there is an opportunity to grow higher gross margin offerings, then you're potentially growing the profit faster compared to if you were to choose to invest in growing lower margin opportunities. It would be a lot of effort for a lot less opportunity. It would be squeezing really, really hard for not as much juice.
Oh, I love everything you said. I want to go back to, I mean, that's brilliant. And, what people don't realize is it is possible to lose money with every sale. It's not something that you're excited about your sales. And until you work with someone like yourself again to understand, what areas are profitable, you might just be digging a bigger hole every time you make a sale. So it's really important. And also, I want to go back to the visualization comment, because while people might hear that and think, well, so I can dream, big deal, like everybody can dream. Visualizing your future, there's a way to do that really allows that to be realized. And so it is a serious thing. Like sometimes I talk about it a lot, and sometimes I feel like people think, well, I don't need anybody to help me with that. I can just go sit somewhere and create a dream. And other people get very stuck and really, and I've been there myself, where it's like, I just don't feel like I have a vision. And I don't feel like I can stab in the dark at things I might want, but it's not like a cohesive overall vision that is really meaningful to me. And sometimes I think most of the time, it takes some coaching and some great questions and some direction to actually build that vision. So it's not a silly thing. It's actually a very challenging thing to do. And people, I think the more seriously you take it, the better off you and your business will be. So I really am excited that you brought that up. And all of these things are so important. So anyway, I would imagine if some light bulbs are going off for business owners out there about what they might need. And unfortunately, our time is flying by, but
I was just looking at the clock.
I know, I'm sad. It happens every time. But I would love to have just a little bit of a discussion around debt, because that can be something that's a problem, but it can also be a nice little safety net and some help. So what do you tell clients about debt?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I completely agree. This can be a whole conversation in and of itself. But let's define debt. Debt is getting someone else's capital, someone else's cash to be able to take care of something that you need, and you're promising to pay it back. and probably with interest. That's why they ended up loaning you money in the first place.
Right.
So, when it comes to the relationship with debt, some people are like, I'm never requiring any debt at all. Well, that means that all of the money that your business will ever need needs to be generated from yourself as a business owner and you paying money in as seed capital to get things started, or it needs to come from your business's operations, meaning it needs to have positive cash flow to be able to invest. But for others, and for those that are scared of debt but are curious, how can I consider debt? As either as a business owner, as an individual, debt comes at a cost, and that cost is called interest. And the higher that interest rate is, the more expensive that debt is going to be. Think of it like you're purchasing money. And if it has a higher interest rate, that money is more expensive. And the only reason you'd purchase money is because you could make more money. So here's an example. If you take on debt and you find you bring on debt at 5% interest rate, or let's go 10% interest rate, right? If you aren't able to get that money back at a rate of higher than like if you got $100, if you can't get $110 back, then that cost of that money is too much. But if you could turn that $100 into $200, then guess what? You pay out that $10 and that $90 is left for you to keep. So if that money is able to propel you to make more money because of key investments within your business, then it's a positive thing for the business. Said in accounting terms, there's a cost of capital, and you want a return of investment that's higher than your cost of capital. So if you're able to make 20% profit against capital that cost you 10% interest, which was the example that I just gave, or not, 100% profit on the 10% 10% cost of capital, then you've got a winning deal essentially. Now, things get really complex though if you're taking on debt of higher and higher interest rates, because the threshold of recouping your money becomes a lot more challenging. You need to make that much more money. So if you have a mix of debt, say that you've already found yourself in a debt situation and I'll do both a business owner example and a personal example. In a business owner, maybe you have business credit cards that might be somewhere between 50 to 20%. You've got a line of credit that's a variable rate that might be somewhere between 7 and 10% right now. Maybe you took out an idle loan during the pandemic, which has, I think it was a 3.25% or so. It's more important to pay off the debt that has the higher percentage interest rates, because in terms of an order of operations, like always give the minimum payment so that you are able to preserve your credit worthiness. But if you have excess capital and want to pay off debt, pay off the higher interest rate items first. Pulling it to a personal example, you've got your credit cards that are probably somewhere between 15 to 20%. You've got maybe a student loan that you had taken out that may be sitting at 5%. And then maybe you had refinanced your mortgage in the middle of the pandemic and was able to get it down to 3.5% or something like that. Or maybe say you have a mortgage now sitting at 8% and a student loan at 5%. Well, again, you want to pay off the credit cards first, because the interest that'll build and roll up with that will continue to grow at that higher interest rate. So it's important to whittle down the debt that's of the higher interest rate first, because its cost is the highest, and you don't want to keep incurring the high cost stuff early. I know that there are a lot of financial tips out there that may say whittle down everything at the same rate, or they may say whittle down the thing that has the lowest balance first, just to get it out of the picture. And there definitely are senses for each of those, but if you want to be the most cost advantageous, you want to pay attention to the thing that has the highest interest rate first and work on using You minimum pay everything and
Mhm.
use the excess to pay off those highest interest rates first, whether you're a business or a person.
That's great. Thank you, Jayson. Yeah, I think, and debt is a real interesting one because people do carry a lot of beliefs around debt.
Hmm.
And it can be, a way to help you grow for sure, whether you take it on for your own education or for your business or whatever. So you have to really check in, I think, and be aware of your early belief systems around debt to adjust what needs to be adjusted to take advantage of what you're talking about.
Yeah,
That's a deep
exactly.
one for people.
A very deep one. Like I said, we could spend a whole podcast just
Yeah,
talking about just that. So
yeah.
maybe an idea for a future one.
I love that. I have a module of some trainings in my Money Day program too that talk about that. And just if you can visualize two different people or two different businesses. One absolutely refuses to use any debt, and the other is pretty like cool with it.
Hmm.
And the way
The
their lives
trajectory.
will
Mm.
go is pretty different. So anyway,
Yeah.
I love that. So thank you. You are a wealth of financial wisdom, and I know your company offers so many ways to engage with the variety of accounting folks that we discussed. And you guys work all over the country, correct?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, why
Yeah.
don't you tell us how we can contact you? And, if people just want to have a conversation, can they do that to just, find out more?
Absolutely. So if you're curious about staying tuned with what Norman Professional Services does, you could find us on LinkedIn and on YouTube, where both myself and our founder, Walter Miller, will just be sharing some quick tips and tricks about entrepreneurship, financial literacy. And if you want to be in contact with either myself or our founder directly, we do have a contact us page on our website where you could reach out and we could get a calendar meeting scheduled to be able to share a one-on-one conversation to be able to learn more about what it is that you are going through as a business owner.
Yeah, thank you. I hope people will do that because I really do think you offer a great service, and it's not industry specific in any way. I mean, I think you are involved in a lot of different industries, and yeah. So, okay, well, Jayson, thank you so much for your time, and I love the clarity with which you speak about all of this. I think that's the other thing that scares people is talking to financial people sometimes can feel a little jargony, and sometimes you walk out of the room thinking, I don't really know what he just said. So you are not that person, and I think that's a huge. I think a accounting firm that can communicate well with their clients that's a huge bonus.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Michelle. I mean, friendly, empathetic communication is important. It's one of our core values. And like it says above me, we help numbers not be so scary. They don't have to be so scary for folks. So, Michelle, it was an absolute pleasure being a guest on Money and You. And I really appreciate you sharing the invitation with me.
Thank you so much. I think people got a lot out of this. And audience, please tune into Jayson Mamaclay's YouTube, the Norman Professional Services YouTube channel. Sounds like there's a lot of great info there. I'll be tuning in as well, and reach out. You heard it. There's a lot that can help you as either an individual or a business owner, and so. Yes, and thank you so much for listening to the Money and You show. We so appreciate it. And if you would like to leave a rating or a review, we would really appreciate that. Share it with your friends who might need to hear some of the information in this episode. And thanks so much. We'll see you next week.